Whew. All right, here we are. Here we stand. Amazing. So, everybody, I'm Chris Rogers. I'm the program director for the Paul Robeson House Museum. For those who don't know, we are located at 50th and Walnut Streets. We're a project of the 501c3, which is the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, which aims to sort of like lift up sort of like cultural movements in West Philadelphia. We sort of really focus on Black cultural production in West Philadelphia. So honored to be with you all tonight, and I have to begin with just a round of thank yous. Our partner, Blue Stoop, Emma. You'll learn more about Blue Stoop in a second, but shout out to Blue Stoop, who's a partner here on the event. Our DJ, John Morrison, was up there just playing music. He's gonna have some even more great music tonight, so shout out to John Morrison. Yes. The folks at the ICA, James, Natalie, the whole team. We have a number of staff support tonight and volunteers. We're so thankful for opening up the space, so shout out to the ICA. Much love to Hakeem's Bookstore, which is here tonight. I hope you all get to engage with them. Repair the World Philadelphia is out front handling our activity table. Please contribute. We're building out a West Philly soundtrack for Liberation. So check in on that. We have a special Weckerly's ice cream sponsor tonight, which is going to be really good. That'll be at the party. It's part of the party. And once again, thank you for all the volunteers that are here tonight helping to put this event together. It wouldn't be possible without you. Whew. All right. As I plan for this event and how intentional and how many people were just going to be here tonight, I think it's really important that we begin with acknowledging the land. So we recognize that we are presently here on occupied Lenape land. The Robeson House has a special sort of relationship with Indigenous 215, which is a group of Native activists here in the city that sort of is an outgrowth of the Standing Rock Coalition that started here in Philadelphia. And we've been working to really think about how we are responsible in terms of like continuing to lift up Indigenous and Native resistance around the world, really, but also how we contribute to those movements here in Philadelphia. So as we think about the Lenape and the Nanticoke Lenape, there's a tribal group in Jersey. The Indian Removal Act by the U.S. government forced a lot of Lenape to Oklahoma. They're still here with us. That history is here with us. There's a lot of resources out there to be able to learn about that history, and you can learn more about that at indigenous215.org. And we got this amazing event, I'm gonna do a plug, but like we got this amazing event coming up in February with Indigenous 215, where we're talking about the relationships between Black liberation movements and Indigenous sovereignty. So be on the lookout for that. Yes. And I stand here today. I started working with the Robeson. First of all, I saw my brother Kyle here from Chester. I'm from Chester, Pennsylvania. I'm not from West Philadelphia, but I love West Philadelphia. The West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance was started in 1984 by Francis Alston. Yes, the people know Fran here. Amazing. Please give a hand for Mama Fran. Mama Fran passed in 2015, but we know she's still here with us, and the work that we do at the house is about sustaining her legacy. And when Emma and I started discussing and put together this event, we wanted to think about the cultural contributors that are here with us today, that are still presently doing work, but also lifting up the people that came before us that might not be here. And I want to be able to hold space now. We won't be able to do like a full libation, but I just want to give a moment for all of us to name people, whether they're from West Philadelphia and contribute in their legacies in West Philadelphia, or you carry them in West Philadelphia with you. You want to give a moment for many of us in the room to be able to name those folks that we lift up, that provide us a light as we continue to do work in West Philadelphia and around the world. So as I lift up Francis Alston's name, we want to just take a minute now to be able to have you lift up names into the room. And the greeting that we use when an ancestor's name is mentioned, we say Ashe. So I just want to take a moment. It's going to be, you can just say it into the room. And as we hear those names, I want everyone to say Ashe, okay? So, Ashe. 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 Dawood Hakeem. Ashe. 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 Joseph. Ashe. Joseph Beam. Ashe. 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 I don't want to stop this, y'all. This is beautiful. I could just keep going all night. But thank you all. We carry those spirits in here in the room with us, and we continue to sort of lift up those names, and as we continue to sort of like live in responsibility to their legacies. Awesome. So now on to tonight's agenda. So you should come up. Oh, everybody. Emma Eisenberg, y'all. So when Emma and I sat, I had to write this down. So when Emma and I sat down together to join forces and plan a fun, meaningful party/fundraiser, we know we wanted to do something that would gesture both to the past and present of the political, past to the present of political and cultural thought here in West Philadelphia. We were inspired by Paul Robeson, an artist and activist who lived out his life and died here in the neighborhood, in his only book titled Here I Stand. We were also inspired by the space he created for people to be together. While living abroad in Europe, he routinely held salons, along with his wife, and we've been doing a lot of work at the house to also lift up Eslanda Robeson, his wife, to talk about her legacy as well. So when they were in London, they would, while he was in plays and going through sort of like a Shakespeare sort of like moment, Eslanda was in school at the London School of Economics. They would regularly hold salons with folks like C.L.R. James. Shout out Ashe, C.L.R. James. Nnamdi Azikiwe out in Nigeria, Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta. These were people that were around as they began to sort of like build out this like a Black Radical International, which would eventually lead to like the Non-Aligned movement and the Bandung Conference and then the Third World. Okay, I'm giving y'all a tour of the house. I'm sorry. So we thought about that, and the reason why I wore this shirt tonight, a lot of people give me compliments about this shirt. It was designed by Julian David Randall, who's an amazing poet who was here in the city for a while, still out there doing some great work. Paul Robeson, when he's at the House Un-American Activities Committee, he's doing his testimony, he says, my people died to build this country, and no fascist-minded people are going to drive me from it. And that's something that, like, when I think about this shirt, still black, still here, not going anywhere, it kind of reminds me of Paul. So definitely shout out to that. And, oh, I should get into, like, the schedule, right? Okay.
2 sets.
So tonight we'll have 2 sets of readings and reflections, separated by like a 15-minute break so everyone in this room can kind of get to know each other a little bit. And we're inviting people who are living out powerful legacies emerging out of sort of like the cultural wave of West Philadelphia. And so we're so proud to have us with us tonight, Asali Solomon. Zinzi Clemmons is here. Louis Massiah. And then Mike Africa Jr. is on his way. He'll be with us tonight, so shout out to Mike Africa and the Move family. There's really no way you can do an event about West Philadelphia history without, bringing up the critical history and the contributions of the Move family. So we're grateful to have them here with us tonight. And okay, I love notes. After tonight's reflections, we invite you. We got Hakeem's Bookstore, which I have some selections from the authors here with us tonight, as well as some amazing family selections that they'll have on sale. They also got like this cash mob coming up, and Miss Yvonne can tell you all about that. Yes, the Robeson House is working with Repair the World Philadelphia around building out sort of like cataloging acts of freedom, and along with that, cataloging a soundtrack for freedom. So we got this thing called the West Philly Soundtrack for Liberation. So we're taking all requests. Don't give your request to the DJ. Give your request to Repair the World. And and after we're done with this room, we'll turn the music up, we'll have ice cream, we got pizza, but it's gonna be fun. And then we have alcoholic drinks, non-alcoholic drinks, and without further ado, I wanna introduce Emma to talk about some wonderful things.
Thanks, guys. Okay, thank you so much, Chris. Yes, and I wanna still say there's 6 seats up front if you wanna be brave, come on up. So yeah, I'm Emma Eisenberg, I'm the director of Blue Stoop. So for those that don't know, we're a hub for the literary arts here in Philly. So our mission is to help connect writers with each other and to the resources they need to thrive and stay here in the city. We offer rigorous classes in the craft of writing and a lot of different disciplines taught by excellent local instructors. And we also do an event series that pairs nationally touring writers with local writers for an In Conversation series. And then we do special events like this one. So yeah, thank you so much to Chris Rogers and to the Robeson House and to James and to the ICA for having us. So, and I want to say so deeply thank you to the people that have already donated to our Freedom Fund, our Winter Freedom Fund. So Blue Stoop and Paul Robeson House are teaming up together to jointly fundraise for 2 goals. The first for Blue Stoop is our scholarship fund, which allows Philly writers from all walks of life to take our classes and receive financial aid, essentially to pay what you can on a pay what you can basis. So that is what we're fundraising for, and the Robeson House is trying to close out their mortgage fund so they can own their building free and clear. Yeah, and that is the house where Robeson lived and died. So also, a plan and a dream I think of the Robeson House is to have some kind of reading room upstairs and to allow that space to really be lived in and occupied, and to have writers and readers sit there for free and be together. So that'll be really exciting. So be generous if you can tonight. All proceeds from tonight go to that fund. So the drinks, the tote bags, the amazing custom prints that Chris made. As you are able, think about your dollars and know that they're going to the arts here in West Philadelphia. So thank you so much for being here. Our goal is $6,000. We're 65% of the way there, so I think we can do it. Yes, I really, really appreciate that. So, okay, onwards. So we're gonna have 2 readers, a break, 2 readers. It's my privilege to introduce Asali Solomon tonight. Raised in West Philadelphia, just a few blocks from where Paul Robeson lived, Asali Solomon is the author of the story collection Get Down and the novel Disgruntled, both from Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, and both set in Philadelphia. Of Get Down, Victor Laval wrote, quote, "American literature tends to offer its black characters only 2 moods to play, angry or mad, which is why this collection comes as such a blessed relief. Angry and mad make appearances, but so do confused, awkward, hopeful, and sincere. Disgruntled follows a young girl growing up in West Philadelphia as she grapples with the vast gulf between the worlds created by her black intellectual family and her white suburban prep school. Solomon is an associate professor of English at Haverford College, where she is also the director of creative writing. While I am sadly too old to have had Professor Solomon as my teacher at my time at Haverford, that she is the one shaping the voices and stories of students at Haverford now and in the future gives me a hope that I haven't felt in a long time. So please join me in welcoming Asali Solomon to read to you tonight.
Hi, everybody. I didn't really picture this quite this insanely crowded, so now I feel a little strange. I want to thank Blue Stoop and Paul Robeson House for inviting me. I want to thank the ICA. I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm really happy to share the stage with the people I'm sharing it with. I'm happy to share it with Louis Massiah, who I've known since I was a baby, but I was an adult, and he said something really nice to me at that time that I'll never forget, and Zinzi Clemens interviewed me a few years ago, and that was great, and I'm grateful to Mike Africa Jr. for being alive, because he wasn't meant to survive, and a lot of us weren't meant to survive. And I want to say that Paul Paul Robeson was my old neighbor. So for his last 3 years and my first 3 years, we walked the earth together in the same neighborhood, which is really amazing. And also, so I was told to read a little bit from the book about West Philly, just a couple of remarks about West Philly for people who are not originally from West Philly. So recently, my 7-year-old had to interview a bunch of us, and both me and my sister in separate interviews described our childhood as rich, which might have been a bit of a euphemism. So, like, West Philly is a very particular and eccentric Black world. And for the same reasons it was a great place for producing writers, it was sometimes a confusing place to be a child who was trying to be like a normal, regular child. And so my disgruntled is about Kenya, who starts out in elementary school at Lee, and her parents are John Brown, not his government name, and Sheila. And the book takes place in the 1980s, and her parents have a political group called the 7 Days. Kenya's story is 98% not my story, but I definitely repurposed some of my more colorful memories of growing up in the city. And just the last thing I want to say about this section, so I'll read one brief section from the beginning and one from later, is happy early Kwanzaa to all of you in West Philadelphia. Okay. In the first grade at Henry Charles Lee School in West Philadelphia, when Kenya told the kids that she celebrated Kwanzaa, no one knew what she was talking about. By the third grade, led by the tiny tyrant Letitia Simmons, the kids were calling her an African booty scratcher and chanting to a conga line rhythm, "You don't get no presents, you don't get no presents." In fact, she did get presents on the last morning of Kwanzaa, 7 days after Christmas. By the fourth grade, Kenya was down to one friend. It wasn't just the Kwanzaa problem. In any way, she could have lied about Kwanzaa, like she suspected Fatima McCullers did. Fatima, whose dad had dreadlocks and who always said Christmas and Santa Claus with a suspiciously wavering inflection. It was also that Kenya couldn't eat any pork, including the bologna sandwiches that were the everyday fare of the lunchroom. Something to do with her father muttering that white people forced slaves to eat hog guts, although as far as Kenya could see, white people loved bologna enough to give it both a first and a second name. It wasn't just those problems. It was that she wasn't allowed to watch Give Me a Break, Good Times, or Different Strokes because, according to her mother, watching Black people on TV acting the fool was worse than not watching any at all. It was that she was forbidden to actually speak the Pledge of Allegiance and had been directed to mouth it with her hand not actually touching her chest. It was that she had to call her father Baba, and when she asked if she could call him Daddy, like other people, it had triggered what seemed like days of lectures during which Kenya learned to hate the phrase other people. It was that while her parents said grace like normal people, they directed it to the Creator instead of God. It was that she was never, ever allowed to say nigger, even during the step where they had to say nigger boy. In fact, when she first heard someone say it in school, Letitia Simmons in the third grade, Kenya said, "Ooh," expecting everyone to join in. They didn't. Even Aaliyah, the pale girl from Sudan, actual Africa, but no one called her a booty scratcher, with a long rope of hair, was laughing at her. And when Kenya pointed at Letitia explaining, she said the N-word, they laughed even harder. Okay, so that's the beginning of Disgruntled. Move on to another brief section. The shame of being alive was a phrase Kenya would hear in her father's voice. It wafted in and out of her consciousness like the chorus of a song. What he meant by this, it took her years to understand, since just as often he said, "Sure, that's nothing to be ashamed of." Things that were, quote, nothing to be ashamed of included bodily functions, growing up poor as her mother had, and feeling lonely as her father had when he was a child in the suburbs. And of course, though both white folks and some Black, like his parents, tried to make you feel it, there was certainly no shame in being Black. But Kenya came into increasing consciousness of how fitting it was that John Brown had provided the language for the shame. After all, he and Sheila had created a world of opportunity for her to experience it. In December of Kenya's 4th grade year, Sheila decided that she would use her library connections to stage a Kwanzaa presentation with the 7 Days, that's a group her family starts, a political group, at the library on 52nd Street, a few blocks away from their house. When it came time to start on that Saturday afternoon, the small programs room on the first floor suddenly looked big as a ragged handful of families scattered themselves among the rows and rows of chairs. Kenya counted technically more participants than 7 Days, though it didn't feel that way. And then on the border between presenter and participant, there was an enthusiastic drunk man in a bright red wool cap with a surprising amount of knowledge about Kwanzaa. "Ujima!" he shouted as Sheila lit a red candle. Before she'd even had a chance to say the principle, "Kaumaba," he growled, giving the word an extra syllable. Sheila ignored him, her jaw growing steely. John Brown stared into the middle distance. As her parents and their friends took up a chant that Yaya had designed to help the daycare kids memorize the principles, Kenya's eye was suddenly drawn to the cracked open door. There stood an open-mouthed Letitia Simmons and her mother. The two sported the same ponytail, spiky with escaping bits of straightened hair, and even though Letitia was only 9, they also wore matching leather pants. At Letitia's side was her minion, Fatima. Kenya could see herself in the girl's eyes, sporting an orange, yellow, and brown dashiki and a forehead-straining vertical braided hairstyle that was her mother's imitation of an African mask. The chanting and clapping were not loud enough to drown out the sound of Letitia and Fatima laughing, or the sound of Letitia's mother admonishing the girls for having no class. Letitia's laughter was the soundtrack to the shame of being alive. And actually, Kenya wasn't sure, being laughed or gawked at, or simply being in a place where shame coated the walls, floor, and ceiling. In February, a week after she turned 10, Kenya's parents took her to a Black History Month celebration that had been advertised in the Philadelphia Tribune. It was at a poorly heated community center in North Philadelphia where John Brown had gone to the occasional Black Marxist meeting. Kenya's fingers grew stiff with cold that night as she watched presenter after presenter make the same joke about the shortest month of the year. A giant man wearing a beret and a green army jacket who reminded her of Brother Camden brandished a flyer about salmonella poisoning and repurposed kangaroo meat at the McDonald's. Then a spotty film strip about a black junkie named Charlie got chewed up in the projector. Taking up the theme of the destroyed film, a black-clad man did a mime performance about being trapped in a box. The box, he said, was heroin. Finally, 2 women in colorful bikinis jumped around to some Africanish disco music. As their dance was winding down, they invited people from the audience to get up with them. Many of the men went, including John Brown, who jutted his hip bones forward and waved his hand. Sheila's mouth closed in a line. One of the women's tops fell open and a thin breast jumped out. As the minutes passed, Kenya veered wildly between the desires to laugh and to cry. She fought a mounting nausea. Thank you.
Oh, Louis, I got to say some words about you before you come up. I'm going to just say like a quick introduction. It's all right. No, you're good. Thank you again, Asali. So to introduce Louis Massiah, I feel like, so as someone who sort of like came into Philly, I think like the first time I would always come to like movie screenings, like really good Black independent movies, and I would see Mr. Massiah there, and I always would see him at these screenings, but I didn't know who he was until I opened up this book, Conversations with Tony K. Bambara, and I see like, this name looks familiar. I feel like I've seen this name around Philly a lot in this particular interview. And I come back and I'm like, oh, wow, that's Louis Massiah. His legacy is sort of like, is decades worth long of working, of creating once like beautiful films on his own, but also working with amazing sort of like cultural contributors from all, from Philly and throughout the world. So really grateful for Louis' contributions and the amazing work that he does with Precious Places. If anybody got to see the screenings on December 3rd at Lightbox, some amazing documenting histories of sort of like undocumented histories here in Philadelphia of amazing places, amazing stories of cultural preservation. So we thank you so much for your labor, and without any further ado, we want to bring up Louis Massiah.
Anyway, thank you so much, Chris and Emma, for organizing this. And yeah, this is a really wonderful occasion. I am not going to be, I am going to read something, but I actually am going to, unlike Asali, I'm sort of at the beginning of my process. I use writing as a way to make films. And oftentimes that the words are really what kind of guide my own project. So and it's also, the particular project that I'm working on has a lot of resonances with really what Chris was talking about earlier. The project is called The Tenets of Lenape-Hocking in the Age of Magnets, which is like, well, what's that about? But it's about this land, and Lenape-Hocking is what I would imagine this land should have been called. And the age of magnets is really that period of the industrial age when black folks came from the South, came from other parts of, came from the Caribbean, came to work in industries, in electromagnetic industries. And the tenets mean that we're not permanent. None of us. We're not permanent. The land is what's permanent. So this particular kind of riff is really something that I'm calling North of Tinicum, which is not the other side of the Schuylkill. So it's easy to forget that we sit on sacred lands, this land marked by the western banks of the Schuylkill, these midlands north of Tinicum Marsh, still traversed by trails that led from bogs to meadow to farmland and trading ports, trail roads that we have renamed as streets, as pikes, as avenues with names like Woodland, Chinsessing or Kingsessing, Elmwood. It's easy to forget that we sit on hallowed ground. In fact, that we struggle against what it, we struggle against those who want us to forget. For if we recognize the transcendental value of history, if human connection is a bond that must be respected, then the system of power and wealth are shifted, and the land itself is sovereign without human lordship. Then the systems of economic capture, of material transfer are challenged. My earliest memories of this land north of Tinicum go back to the middle of the last century, the 1950s. I'm not sure what harvest year that would correspond in the Anisinape calendar. 10,000 years of human habitation, perhaps? But I do know this land we called West Philadelphia has been a beacon of sorts of self-sufficiency, self-determination. It had been a place where Africans now in the Americas could live communally and control land, could raise families, could worship together, could find land to bury the dead with honor. West Philadelphia held the possibilities of realization, of human realization. It may not have been the first home in this latitude, but it was often the first chosen home, a willful, conscious place where people had chosen to settle. Homes, not rooming houses, for the first time, for the majority, not living in carved-up dwellings, but a house, a home for family, with porches and yards, yards to plant and grow, the possibility of a place without land, the possibility of a place without landlord, a first for many. My own stories of North Philadelphia was a place where I met those people my father trusted and loved, although not a churchgoer at all, in fact, quite, anyway, critical of church. This goes back to his church, which was St. Thomas, which was then located in West Philadelphia. It had another story of a church crossing the Schuylkill for self-sufficiency. This, the Church of Absalom Jones, the second church in this part of the Northern Hemisphere. And anyway, so this was so the project is based on these stories about North Philadelphia. So many of the people that we came to visit in North Philadelphia were connected with the Episcopal Church, and I'm someone who I don't go to church. I have nothing against the church. I have a little bit against the church, but I don't go to church. But these people that we came to visit were all connected with the church. There were ministers, there were wives of ministers, there were deacons, there were people that the church was quite important, and our role really was to learn from them. My brother and sister and I would be sort of farmed out to couples. Many of these couples were couples that married during the Depression, and during the Depression, a lot of black folks did not have children, made a conscious decision not to have children. And it was our job to be like the house servants. So we would clean backyards. These are older people. We would, wash the house for them and sort of take care of things. I guess the other kind of very important memory of West Philadelphia was where the movie theaters were, and it really. There was, the Nixon, there was the Locust, the Capitol. The avenues were lined with movie theaters. There were movie theaters in other places, but just the sheer bulk of the movie theaters in West Philadelphia really had this wonderful attraction. And I remember sort of looking at the Philadelphia Inquirer had this whole neighborhood movie section, and you could just look down and read what everything you wanted to see would be here. I guess for some reason, the idea of seeing films in Center City was not what we were sort of kind of accustomed to. And also, in terms of restaurants, singular, which was Linton's Restaurant, which was at 40th and Chestnut. It's actually now, I think, the police district or the Center City Police District. But my only kind of near connection with Paul Robeson was there was a gentleman named Bill and Miriam Crawford, who would take Paul Robeson to Linton's Restaurant. And I remember going there with my father one day and seeing these three people there, and that definitely stays with me. West Philadelphia is really where I began consciously doing community history projects. And the first place we worked in was Belmont. Belmont was a real center for the African American community. In fact, I was actually born in Belmont. There's a women's hospital that's now closed in Belmont. And there was a doctor there, a woman named Dr. Helen Dickens, who at that point was delivering children there. But Belmont, we sort of began community histories in there by sort of walking with neighbors and having them talk about what was significant and what was important. There's a gentleman named Mr. William Martin, or Sonny Martin, who was this fixture of Belmont and who sort of took us on a walking tour. The second person was Mrs. Waters, Linda Richardson's mother. And another sort of fixture of Belmont. And the Richardson House was actually where the defense of Angela Davis in Philadelphia. She was one of the chief organizers for the defense of Angela Davis in Philadelphia. She and her husband. So so West Philadelphia is this land that still of promise, but very much threatened, and this place of self-sufficiency we haven't given up on, but it is really important to really draw from this land that, and that's something, there's a reason that people settled here. Draw from this land and draw from this energy as we go forward. That's me. So.
Thank you again. Thank you. So the way we had planned it, that we didn't want to do all the readings at one time. We want to take like a small little intermission break to give people a chance to move around. If we have any, take like a bio break. If we have any elders in the room that we make sure that we can have a seat for at this moment, we can also do that. Also, before we begin, like a 10-minute intermission. We also want to say, if you are looking to get your book signed tonight by either Asali Solomon or Zinzi Clemmons, you should probably go to Hakim's and purchase that in the intermission. So we want to take a 10 and I'll also say, during this 10 minutes, I think what's really important with the mix of people that we have here tonight is to take a look around, introduce yourself to someone you might not know, ask them about what brought them out tonight, ask them about their relationship to West Philadelphia, the work that they do, the places they go, the restaurants. Let's get to know each other while we're here. So with that being said, we're going to take like a 10-minute intermission break. We'll pull you back in. And get for our next set of readers, which is Zinzi Clemens and Mike Africa Jr. So, 10 minutes, y'all. We'll be right back.
Hello. I'm going to invite you to find your seat. We're going to get started for round 2. Okay. So, who did you meet? Anybody exciting? Those next to you? Excellent. Okay, so welcome back to Here We Stand. I really appreciate, again, everyone who's perused the table, who's gone to Hakim's table, perhaps bought Zinzi's book or Asali's book. We want to make sure to support local bookstores this holiday season. As we know, Amazon is taking over the world, but if we can invest in those that are close to us, I think they would be really appreciative. So thank you so much to Hakim's and to Yvonne for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce Zinzi Clemens. Clemens was raised in Philadelphia by a South African mother and an American father. Her debut novel, What We Lose, which was published in 2017, was named Debut Novel of the Year by Vogue and received praise from The Atlantic, The Guardian, The New York Times, The New Yorker, and others, as well as being a finalist for the Aspen Awards Literary Prize, the California Book Prize, a Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Leonard Prize. Quote, illness, race, and heartbreak collide in this beautiful debut about a college student who's trying to come to terms with the death of her vivacious South African-born mother, wrote Entertainment Weekly. In the book, Clemens' main character, Tandy, muses, I've often thought that being a light-skinned black woman is like being a well-dressed person who is also homeless. You have nowhere to rest, nowhere to feel safe. Further, Clemens is a 2017 National Book Award 5 Under 35 honoree, and wrote the foreword to a new edition of Jean Toomer's Cane, published by Penguin Classics in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Zinzi Clemens.
Hi, everyone. This is an amazing crowd. I'm really happy to be here. I spent most of my first few years in Yeadon, Pennsylvania, just sort of on the other side of the border, and spent a lot of time here in West Philadelphia, most recently when I was writing my novel. And I found a really wonderful literary community. I was a member of the writing group that Emma founded. And what I found so wonderful about the community here is that it's really focused on community and focused on kind of our social standing and advancing ideals beyond sort of literary achievements. And this is something that I've always really tried to do with my own work. What I find really wonderful about this place is that the awareness of our place in history, our place in this country, as we've seen so far, these speakers today, and that's something that has always been important to me as a writer. So I decided to talk today about some of my sort of political influences, and I thought about sort of what has kind of shaped me into the political person that I am today, and especially insofar as the city has done so. And that really happened for me with my mother. My mom was an educator. She taught at Samuel Huey Elementary School, a few blocks from here, which unfortunately is no more. Also at the Center for Literacy. Both of my parents were graduates of UPenn, and I spent a lot of time here, especially when I was younger. My mother was from South Africa, and at the height of her career, she was the assistant director of Head Start in the school district of Philadelphia. And this really, more than anything, had a big effect on me. She was really passionate about education, and a lot of that came from her childhood in Johannesburg. She was active in anti-apartheid, and when she was young, the Soweto uprising happened, and her father was actually an undertaker who was responsible for caring for some of the bodies of the young school children who were killed in that massacre. And this was something that had an indelible effect on her, and it influenced her to pursue education, particularly in this field where she was really caring for underprivileged, primarily black children. So the stories that she told me about her daily work, where she was struggling in an administration against with a lot of difficult constraints and really fighting for these children, had a really strong effect on me, both as a writer and now as an educator. I work in higher education. So I'm going to read the first part of an essay. It's called Freedom. And I'm just going to read the first few pages. And this is an essay about an ancestor, Nelson Mandela, and it talks about my last experience in the country and some, the last sort of important experience that I had there. I arrived in Johannesburg on December 2nd, 2014, where it is warm and sunny to Pennsylvania's frigid and snow-kissed. My father will join me in 2 weeks, my brother to follow a week later. In 1 month, we will unveil my mother's headstone in a South African tradition that takes place exactly 1 year after a person has died. The ceremony resembles a funeral in scope, usually consisting of a service at the graveyard and repast afterward. My father, brother, and I are stumbling into this ritual somewhat blindly, leaving the details to my older cousin, Shani. It will take place on Christmas Day, followed by traditional Christmas lunch. After that, my adult cousins and I will board a plane to much warmer Cape Town on the southern coast, where most Johannesburg residents who are able to spend the festive season. These 2 weeks mark the first time I have been in this country alone. It is my first time crossing the ocean by myself, the only time I have been able to choose which relatives I visit and whose house to stay at. My first time planning which sites to see, which neighborhoods to visit. For the first time here, I will have some freedom, and it doesn't escape me that it has come at the cost of my mother's life. And also, perhaps because of this fact, I am scared and excited at the same time. My mother was, for much of our 27 years together, an incredibly fearful person. I grew up in a sleepy college town in the suburbs of Philadelphia, where most of our neighbors left their doors unlocked and belongings unattended in public. We were the only family with an alarm system, which my mother armed every night. She was named Dorothy, Dottie for short, the second youngest of 5 children from a colored or mixed-race family from Johannesburg's western suburbs, where they were relocated from the city after the Group Areas Act. She was the first one in her family to go to college, and then the first one to leave a 20-minute radius of her parents' home, where her extended family of aunts, uncles, cousins, around 60 in all, still lives. Rebellious and opinionated, she became involved in the anti-apartheid struggle in college against the wishes of my grandparents. When she was 19, the Soweto uprising occurred, and my grandfather, who worked as an undertaker, buried the bodies of murdered schoolchildren from the nearby Black Township. She was forever impacted by this experience, and later in her life, she would become a teacher in inner-city schools, teaching mostly Black students whose struggles surprisingly resembled those of the children in Soweto. My parents met in Botswana in the 80s, where my mother was smuggling literature back into the country, and my father was on a post-college volunteering trip. After a brief courtship, my mother moved over to the States, where they settled in Philadelphia, and she entered graduate school. I believe it was her constant exposure to tragedy and violence that weakened her, and moving to America dulled her edges. I was surprised to learn of her wild days. The mother I knew was fearful for herself and her children and kept us on a short leash. Her job was physically and emotionally challenging. Growing up, every day I would hear her relay the wrenching events of her workday, stories of children who were neglected and sometimes abused by parents, who were themselves influenced by a broken system. I didn't understand what was being left unsaid in these stories, where her commitment to these children came for at that age. I wondered why she didn't simply quit. After her mother died, she became an unofficial head of her family. Even from a distance, she was entrenched in gossip, a confidant for my young cousins and aunts and uncles alike. When she became sick, many of them traveled to America, many for the first time, to help us take care of her. And though they wouldn't admit it at the time, to say goodbye. When she became sick, after I was long gone from her house and living in New York City, she confronted death and the fears that came along with it. We got along better than we ever had, started to finally accept each other's flaws and appreciate each other as people. We became friends. And then just as soon, my protector, who had begun to peel away when her sickness started to absorb her, was finally irrevocably gone. I stay with my Aunt Avril, whose first name is my middle name, and who has my mother's body sense of humor. She tells loud, dirty jokes in mixed company, to which listeners exclaim, "Oh, Avi," with mock exasperation. She has all of my mother's charms and few of her hang-ups. Avi calls us in Philadelphia every Sunday, ostensibly to check on us, like my father's sister often does, but she makes no pretense at resilience like the others do. I get the feeling that she calls me partly to commiserate. She visited us in America twice when my mother was sick and dying, and the experience of caring for her bonded us together. I'm not over it, she tells me now, and she is so open that I can see all the broken parts inside her. On my first full day in Joburg, I wake early in the morning. She makes me 5 roses tea with milk and a croissant, and we sit in her living room and tell stories about my mother and cry, and I don't hesitate when I feel the tears coming, as I usually do. I let her hug me for a long time, and her bosom feels like my mother's. On my third day, I wake late, at around 11 a.m. On my way to the kitchen, Abby stops me in the hallway. I can tell by the way she pauses that something has happened. I can't take any more bad news, I think. She tells me that Mandela died early in the morning, just a few neighborhoods over in an upscale neighborhood called Houghton. She's been sitting up, watching the news for hours, she says. My cousins and I made plans to gather at my cousin Kim's house because her place is near the bars. It was supposed to be our first night out together. Instead, we order in Chinese food and drink Kim's good bottles of wine. They talk about Mandela's death, what they think it will mean for the country's future. Stacy tells me about a coworker of hers, a black girl a few years younger than us, who dismissed the fuss their office was making. So he died, she huffed, and went on about her day. We all cluck and roll our eyes because we all remember what it was like before. We all live in the shadows of our parents' stories. Stacy's boyfriend is white. Stacy has always been hard-nosed, quick-tempered, but he has softened her in the way that love does. Every time I see him sitting in my grandfather's house, I am jarred a little bit. He's the first white person I've ever seen there, and I feel sort of grateful. After a couple more glasses of wine, Stacy looks at me and says with a soft, tipsy smile, "I keep thinking, How lucky is it that your mom gets to meet Mandela in heaven? The mood in the city is one of restrained mourning. Madiba's name comes up often in conversation. The radios play a constant stream of down-tempo ballads and gospel songs, and in between commercial breaks, they play pre-recorded tributes, always with a conspicuous plug for the station, reminding us who sponsored this deeply emotional shared experience. The mood is not one strictly of sadness. The mourning is respectful, laced with celebration, jubilation even. I see it in the South African flags my family members place outside their homes, in the people who chant and sing revolutionary songs outside Mandela's home, in the tones of admiration that punctuate any discussion of him. The mix of tragedy and pride, of ululating and flag waving, harkens directly back to independence in 1994. That day, my parents got me out of school early so that I could stand beside my mother in the old Philadelphia Civic Center as she cast her vote for Mandela. They announced that there will be a public memorial service at FNB Soccer Stadium in Soweto. Dozens of heads of state, the city completely devoted to it in the next week. I need to go, I tell my family. As large as the service is expected to be, it's on a Tuesday and the government does not declare a holiday, so all of my family goes to work. I try to organize a ride with my family friends. Anyone who says they may be going, I speak to. The roads around the stadium will be closed, and instead public transportation will be made free to and from. A new system of express buses and commuter trains is in place, built to support the World Cup in 2010. Before then, transportation was unreliable and dangerous. The unregulated minibuses, called taxis, and Putco buses that service most of the black population are the frequent cause of fatal crashes on the highways. Despite this progress, my family still lives with the old vision of transportation in Johannesburg, cars. They bristle when I tell them I want to go. On the morning of the memorial, all of my leads have gone nowhere, and I resign myself to watching the service on TV at my grandfather's house, where I've gone because it's closer to Soweto than Abby's house further north. My cousin Terry is on her way to work. Terry is too cool for my family's hometown, a graphic designer and budding hipster who reminds me of myself at 23. Weekends, she hops warehouse parties and gallery openings in Maboneng, the newly developed arts neighborhood downtown, a place that not long ago was no man's land for suburbanites. She encourages me to go by myself, tells me her friends are at the stadium already and they can save me a seat. Terry and her sisters, Kim and Stacy, joke that because of apartheid, they're all different races. Kim, the eldest, is colored because she spent most of her life segregated with other coloreds. Stacy in the middle is white because she came of age when colors and whites were just starting to mix. And Terry, the youngest, is black. Most of her friends are black, but she's dated a few white guys too. This reminds me of myself also because even though multiracial would be a more accurate descriptor of my racial makeup, I've always called myself black. My uncle drives me to an express bus stop nearby. He speaks to a small colored man and his wife and daughter. He introduces us. He's asked the man to watch out for me on the way over. Right after my uncle bids me farewell so he can leave for work, the man taps me on the shoulder. The small pocket on my backpack is open, revealing my keys. I smile, try to laugh it off, but I know I've exposed myself as a hapless tourist. I try to look more serious. As the bus winds towards Soweto, it becomes increasingly full with passengers. After our penultimate stop, the woman next to me shouts a note, and the entire bus erupts in song. We ride that way, buoyed by music, for the long drive up to the stadium hill. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I have to try a humble attempt to introduce Mike. I mean, I have to begin by just saying Mike Africa Jr. is a revolutionary. And just focusing on just in this previous year and seeing the many ways in which Mike lifts up movements to free political prisoners, including the Move 9, in which I think we all should take some time. I think Mike's going to share a little bit about it too, but definitely we need to educate ourselves about how we can kind of continue to ongoing practice of how we get all the Move family out of prison, out of state institutions, period, and including Mumia too. And we can think about that connection as well. But also Mike's music. A story, I didn't tell Mike the story, but a social studies teacher had asked me about I want to teach about I want to teach about moves to my students in high school. Do you have any creative ways I could do it? Well, I said, Mike Africa's got some music that you should be checking out. Put the young people up onto that, put them onto the songs and let that be the introduction. So they can come in and hear the words from the people, right? And the people who are still leading courageous movements to fight back. And also, I just saw this new, in the Robeson House, in particular in the way that we cherish cultural memory. I see a really interesting project that I know Mike is leading around the Move Gallery. And I'm so excited to hear more about this. This is my first time being able to hear more about it. Mike was traveling. I know you just did a presentation out in California recently. Definitely doing a number of public speaking engagements. We are so grateful to have Mike Africa Jr. here with us tonight. And we would love to hear about these news projects you got coming, brother.
On the move. On the move. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
I was trying.
I usually start off my speeches by saying that the people that introduce me usually say everything that I was going to say. So now I don't know what to say. Listening to these stories from these readers, so touching and powerful and moving. And it made me think about some of the stories. I mean, I had this whole thing planned out, what I was going to say and everything, but when I talked to Chris, he was like, hey, listen, I want to hear more about this Move Activist Gallery. So I had to ball up what I had and figure something else out. So I'm going to tell you a story about a man named John Africa. John Africa started out as Vincent Leapart, and he was always a very caring and thoughtful, generous, and understanding person. And he happens to be my mother's uncle. And my father, who was courting my mother, he lived around the corner from my mother. He lived on Brown Street in West Philly, and my mom lived on Reno Street right around the corner. And my dad's brother, I shouldn't say his name, because this story don't make him look well. But anyway, I hope you're not here tonight, Uncle Jimmy, because we about to tell you something. We about to tell the folks something. There's a lot of people here too. Listen, this is a nice crowd, but Uncle Jimmy about to get it tonight. He was never that nice to me anyway, so whatever. So my Uncle Jimmy and my dad is courting my mom and my Aunt Sharon. And one day, when they get around the house, Uncle Fani, who's my mother's uncle and my grandmother's brother, and Uncle Vinny, they're sitting on the steps outside of my grandmother's house. So my dad and my uncle get around the corner, and my uncle was into some kind of illegal activity back then. It's not illegal now, but it was illegal then. Weed. He sold weed. And so he had some money, right? And he bought my grandmother, who was a single mother with 5 kids. He just bought her a brand new car. So my dad and my Uncle Jimmy, they get around the house, they see him, and my Uncle Fani, and they're going in the house to give my grandmother the keys to her brand new car. And she didn't even have a driver's license yet. So my aunt, my mother's sister, Sharon, this is gonna be good for her. She's cool, right? She's like, yeah, let's get the keys and take it for a spin. And my dad, who's 15, my Uncle Jimmy, who's 16, they didn't have a license either. They didn't know how to drive. But they said, yeah, let's go for a ride. So my Uncle Fonny's kids and some other kids was at the house. They all piled into the station wagon, right? Now, my dad, even though he's younger than my Uncle Jimmy, he knew how to drive because he used to park their older brother's car. And back in the day, you wash the car for your big brother. You park it, and and every now and then you get a chance, you take it for a spin around the block. So he kind of knew how to drive, right? Now, if you ever been on Reno Street in West Philly, it's a small street. You can park cars on one side, and you can drive up the other side, but you got to go slow because it's still a small street. So they all pile into the car, and Dad says, I'll drive. And Uncle Jimmy, not wanting to be shown up by his little brother in front of his girlfriend, he like, nah, I'm driving. Take the keys from Dad. He gets in the car. He's nervous. He's nervous because he don't know how to drive. But he got more pride than he got smarts. So he gets in the car. They get in the car. Everybody's in the car. He sit down, and Uncle Jimmy, looking for the ignition, he started it up, and he's visibly nervous, right? And Dad is in the back seat with his girl, my mom, watching him, like kind of trying to help him guide his way through this mission he's about to take them on. Jimmy puts his foot on the brake, and then he puts the car in drive. He pulls out, nervously pulling out of the parking spot, and he gets the car up to the corner. He's about to turn the corner. He hasn't made a turn yet. He's about to turn his corner, and the street is tight already, and it's even tighter because it's Sunday morning and it's church day. So, we might be poor black people from the hood, but on church day, it's Cadillacs and Lincolns and all of that lined up both sides of Union Street around the corner. So Uncle Jimmy is trying to navigate through this turn when one more passenger who hadn't gotten a car yet comes outside, my mom's baby brother Dennis, and he says, I want to go! I want to go! So when that happened, Uncle Jimmy panicked, and instead of hitting the brake, he hit the gas. And he bang, 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 bang. He pinballed down the street, hitting every single car. Every single Lincoln, every single Cadillac. You remember them old school wide Buicks? He hit those too. And he got to the corner, and the car is absolutely totaled. And they get out of the car. Everybody's... Uncle Fonny, who is this drug dealer, very black wealthy, paid cops to leave him be. And no jury would convict him when he came down the street screaming, I'm going to effing kill you. So Jimmy is, Dad's shaking up, the girls are shaking up. And Uncle Fonny was going crazy, talking about how he worked hard to get this car for his sister, and she's a single mother with 5 kids, and you just took this away from her. Jimmy, I am going to effing kill you, right? Uncle Vinny, who became John Africa, came down the street with the same kind of language, talking to his brother, and said, man, shut the F up. You didn't even check to see if these kids was okay. You worried about that car? F that car. F that car. You can get a new car, but you can't get a new Mike. You can't get another Jimmy. You got these nieces in here and all you care about is that car? Forget that car. He grabs my dad. He's shaking. Mike, you all right? He grabbed Jimmy. Jimmy, you all right? And he says, look, go home. And they heard that. They took off. They said, that's the best news we heard all day. They took off. They ran. And they went home. And about 2 weeks later, they come back around the house. They teenagers who got pretty girlfriends right around the corner, but after they heard Uncle Fonny say what he said about to kill somebody, they took a 2-week break from going around the corner. When they did come back finally, guess who was sitting on the steps of their sister's house? Uncle Fonny and Uncle Vinny. Uncle Fonny is still very angry when he sees them walking up the street. But Uncle Vinny was like, man, that's in the past. Hey, Mike, hey, Jimmy, let's play some basketball. Me and my brother against you and your brother. Come on. And they're playing basketball, and the kids are winning. And Uncle Fonny knows that Uncle Vinny is letting them win. But they're winning, and they think they're winning. Uncle Fonny is trying to stomp them in the ground. But Uncle Vinny is trying to let them know that there's no hard feelings. And they won. And when they won, they slapped 5, and things got better from there. And they became friends. I tell that story because the MOVE organization started out in the early 70s. The above ground chapter started out in the early 70s. In 1972, our hair was not popular. The health food diet that consisted of onions and garlic and raw foods, raw fruits and vegetables, was not popular. The activities that the women did, the health and fitness, the working out, the push-ups, that was not popular. People looked at us like we were from Mars. Now, many of these things that MOVE was doing, that John Africa taught MOVE people to do and instilled in people, is very popular and very profitable. MOVE women were having babies at home, naturally, without doctors, in 1973, 1974. And that was seen as dangerous and barbaric and caveman style. Now, it's seen as, what's that word? That they're, say that again? Enlightening, a fad, progressive, all of these things that are now accepted when MOVE was rejected for it. In a couple of years will be the 50-year history of the MOVE organization. In our 50-year history, we have gone through all of these things like where we were treated. In the 80s, locks weren't popular either. They weren't popular in the 90s either. People started having them more, but they weren't popular in the 90s. Nowadays, you can't enter a room without seeing people with locks. You can't watch a sporting event without seeing people with locks. Hollywood celebrities, you got politicians that have locks now. In Philadelphia, here we stand. John Africa started this organization, and within this organization, because of the stand that we took, because of our belief. People don't even understand what our belief is. They think that we're about fighting police officers. That couldn't be further from what we're actually about at all. The MOVE organization's mission is to encourage people to protect life, people, animals, and the environment. That's our mission. But when you're protecting life, when you're protecting people, and you're saying these prisons are wrong and we should abolish them, and the prisons make money for the system, the industry, they want to stop that. So that's when the cops come. And we will defend ourselves, so we got into fights. But we're not about fighting cops. When we say protect the water, the environment, that wasn't seen as a big deal back in 1972. It's seen as a really big deal now. But protecting the environment should never be a thing that anyone should have a problem with. But because the police attacked us for it and we defended ourselves, we got into fights. And it's the same thing with the animals, the same thing with how we educate our children, the same way that we teach our people to eat and be healthy. So in all of this, our family was attacked. We were beaten. We were brutalized. In 1985, the government actually saw fit to fly a helicopter over our house and drop a bomb on it. I'm sure people remember that. I'm sure people have heard about that. Killed 11 people on that day. The MOVE organization has been around for almost 50 years, and this is the part where Chris was talking about. We're building an activist gallery. It's called the MOVE Activist Gallery, and we are trying to share our legacy with the community. We're building this gallery to invite people, to show people what MOVE is really about and what activism is really about. And we're trying to do that here in the city so that the legacy of MOVE can be, and so that people can come and unite with us as we unite with the community. That's what we're working on now. We can talk about it later because I know that's not really what this thing was. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this entire program as much as I did, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much. If that was just like what you just thought of because you said you threw the paper out, bam, that was amazing. Almost like, is there a Blue Stoop class to write a children's book about that? Uncle Vinny, Uncle Vine, we can talk about that. We can put that in the gallery. We're gonna work on that. It's the Alliance, West Philly Alliance, you know what I mean? Okay, so we are.
One more round of applause.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are done with the sort of like reading portion of the day, but the party keeps going. We are here to connect, to build, to network. The role of the West Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, it's a coalition, it's about building, it's about connecting. So we think all these different various contributions and organizations that are here, are present with us tonight. We want to make sure that we're connected and that we're staying connected. And we work with Blue Stoop too.
Absolutely, yes. And I will say one more plug for be as generous as you can to support all of this exciting work. So all of your dollars spent here tonight, again, go to our 2020 Freedom Fund between the Robeson House and Blue Stoop. So our amazing wares for sale are right outside the auditorium to the right. So if you make a donation of $40 or above, that benefits both of us. You will get an exciting Blue Stoop tote and an exciting book, Stories from the Robeson House, documenting a lot of the work that Chris has done and all of the elders and board members of the Robeson House have done as well. And at the $100 level, you also get an exciting custom print that Chris screen printed himself of Paul Robeson. And those are also for sale individually. And again, all proceeds benefit both of us and the arts in West Philadelphia. Thank you so much to the ICA for having us. Yes. Thank you. Yes, one more round for the ICA. Thank you. Yes. There's a dance party upstairs starting now, DJ'd by John Morrison. Weckerly's Ice Cream will be coming out in 10 minutes, 9:15. Do not miss that. Our exciting ice cream partnership, dear and close to my heart. So stick around, buy a drink. If you have a copy of the book or if you'd like to purchase one from Akeem's Books, I'm going to ask Asali and Zinzi to stay near the stage, and I'm sure they'd be happy to sign for you a little bit. Anything else?
Oh, no. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This has been wonderful. bluestoop.org. You can find out more about all the events, all the classes that are going on. The Paul Robeson House, you can find us on Facebook, Paul Robeson House Events. We got some stuff tomorrow. I'll tell you more about that at the table out there. Thanks again.